It was a very heated situation here in Chinatown this afternoon as federal agents swooped in, as crowds got involved and as tempers flared.
ICE is trying to kidnap our neighbors off the streets.
Everybody has a right to live here. There's people coming over from other countries because they're fighting wars. It's not fair.
Law enforcement tried to engage in what they are calling an ongoing federal investigation. We're told agents are part of a joint immigration and customs enforcement crackdown.
For decades, Canal Street, aka Chinatown, has been known as the counterfeit capital of America. Behind every fake designer bag and cash-only sale lies an international web of undocumented labor, organized crime, and tax evasion. On October 21st, 2025, that empire came under fire. ICE and Homeland Security investigations launched Operation Canal Sweep, a coordinated federal strike targeting counterfeit networks, illegal labor rings, and previously deported criminals operating in Lower Manhattan. According to ICE's field report, the raid resulted in over 40 arrests and the seizure of more than $10 million in counterfeit merchandise. But what followed wasn't celebration, it was outrage. The operation sparked immediate backlash from some of New York's most prominent leftist politicians. Andrew Cuomo and Mamdani quickly condemned the arrests. Cuomo accused ICE of terrorizing immigrant families, while Mamdani claimed that the agency was criminalizing survival. Their comments featured in the Post-Millennials report were echoed across social media, fueling protests within hours of the operation. But ICE's data tells a much different story. Every individual detained during Operation Canal Sweep had a criminal record, an active warrant, or an outstanding deportation order. This was no random sweep. This was a calculated law enforcement action that was months in the making. Let's dive into what really happened that morning and why New York's leaders are choosing politics over public safety. Chapter 1. What really happened on Canal Street? By the time the sun came up over Manhattan on October 21st, federal agents were already moving into position. Dozens of ICE and Homeland Security investigations vehicles surrounded Canal Street, the epicenter of New York City's counterfeit market. For an operation that had been months in the making, this was the start of Operation Canal Sweep, a coordinated raid aimed at dismantling organized criminal networks hiding in plain sight.
Armed agents, a massive federal operation unfolds on Canal Street.
People they want to protect? I don't think so.
Sir, we have an election here in less than...
ICE and HSI agents served federal warrants at multiple storefronts and storage basements suspected of housing counterfeit operations. According to an ICE field statement, the raid resulted in the detention of 43 individuals with over $10 million in counterfeit goods seized, including fake luxury bags, watches, electronics, and designer clothing. Several of those arrested were repeat offenders previously deported for criminal convictions ranging from assault to fraud. This wasn't just a raid against street vendors, this was a takedown of an organized crime network stretching far beyond New York. Investigators traced counterfeit supply chains from China through distribution hubs in California and New Jersey. According to federal investigators, the network relied heavily on undocumented labor, fake IDs, and cash-based payments to evade detection.
Of counterfeit goods involving agents from ICE, FBI.
Agents also uncovered evidence of labor trafficking during the sweep, including 2 minors working in basement workshops without documentation. HSI officials confirmed both were placed under federal protection. Despite these findings, major media outlets omitted these details entirely from their coverage. Instead, they framed the event as a crackdown on immigrant vendors just trying to make an honest living.
Eric Adams and the NYPD say they have no part in this sweep. Mayor Eric Adams also...
The facts, however, tell a much different story. Every arrest made during Operation Canal Sweep was backed by a criminal warrant or a deportation order. No family homes were raided, no random searches occurred. This was targeted law enforcement focused on individuals with proven criminal ties. But nuance doesn't trend, outrage does.
Carried out a sweep on...
Within hours, social media was flooded with videos edited to show chaos, not context. Clips of shouting crowds and handcuffed suspects went viral, while captions labeled the operation as state violence. Cuomo and Mamdani's statements amplified this message, giving political legitimacy to what activists were already calling a humanitarian crisis.
ICE raids will make some members of the community more afraid to go to work or school.
But footage taken by bystanders paints a very different picture. Calm, orderly arrests with federal agents following standard procedure, no excessive force, no family separations, just a lawful operation enforcing long-standing immigration and counterfeit laws. Yet these facts never made it to the liberal evening news. The October 21st raid wasn't about harassment, it was about accountability. What unfolded on Canal Street that morning exposed not just the underground economy thriving in Manhattan shadows, but the political theater that erupts whenever federal agents dare to enforce the law. Chapter 2: The Political Firestorm. Cuomo and Mamdani. In most cities, the takedown of a multi-million-dollar criminal network would be hailed as a success, but in New York, politics turned enforcement into controversy overnight. Within hours of the Canal Street raid, two of the loudest voices in the state, Cuomo and Mamdani, were leading this outrage.
All across this nation, I built affordable housing in this city when I was in my 20s. I know how to...
Cuomo took to social media almost immediately in a post highlighted by the Post Millennial. He accused ICE of terrorizing immigrant families and claimed the raid was a disgraceful abuse of power. His message spread across X within minutes, gathering thousands of retweets from activist accounts. Mamdani followed suit, publishing his own post claiming ICE was criminalizing survival and turning immigrants into scapegoats. His comments were echoed by several left-leaning New York City council members who appeared at protests late that evening, demanding an immediate halt to all federal immigration raids in the city.
After the vehicles passed through, witnesses say federal agents in tactical gear set off 2 flash grenades.
But while Cuomo and Mamdani were framing the story as an act of cruelty, the ICE New York field office was releasing its official report. Every single person arrested during the operation had either a criminal record, a private deportation order, or a verified connection to counterfeit trafficking networks. These were not families being separated. They were criminal offenders operating illegally in the United States.
As it's difficult for them to get licenses, making them more vulnerable. Atia called today's federal enforcement.
Still, Cuomo and Mamdani doubled down. In interviews later that week, both men accused ICE of profiling and called for the Department of Justice to review the agency's actions. But as the facts emerged, that narrative began to crumble. Court filings confirmed the operation was authorized by federal warrants signed by a New York magistrate judge, meaning every action taken on Canal Street had judicial approval.
No business being before the court, the same was immediately adjourned.
So why the outrage? For politicians like Cuomo and Mamdani, attacking ICE isn't about facts, it's about optics. Both men have built a political capital by positioning themselves as champions of immigrant rights, even if that means defending those who break the law. It's a narrative that plays well on social media, but it collapses under real legal scrutiny. Mamdani's rhetoric mirrors that of a national progressive movement like Abolish ICE, which equate immigration enforcement to oppression. But in this case, the data shows otherwise. Every arrest was tied to criminal activity, not ethnicity or status. ICE Director David O'Neill Brown stated plainly during a press conference, "We don't target communities, we target criminals." But that quote never made it to CNN's coverage. In the end, Cuomo and Mamdani's outrage wasn't about protecting their constituents, it was about protecting their platforms. The Canal Street raid revealed a political truth as clear as it is uncomfortable. In modern New York City, standing against law enforcement earns more attention than standing up for law and order.
Our troops into cities across the country and what they believe are inhumane and illegal deportations.
Chapter 3: Media Manipulation and Leftist Framing. The reaction from mainstream media followed a familiar pattern. Within hours of the Canal Street raid, headlines across left-leaning outlets reframed the story, transforming a targeted law enforcement operation into what they described as a crackdown on immigrants. Context was stripped away and emotion was amplified. The narrative was no longer about counterfeit crime or deportation warrants. It was about ICE versus the people.
One person seen covered in a blanket, taken away by law enforcement.
The media didn't lead with the $10 million in counterfeit goods seized. They didn't mention that several arrestees had outstanding felony warrants. Instead, they led with tears and slogans, showing images of street vendors in handcuffs, followed by politicians condemning racism and state violence. The actual court documents were rarely mentioned, if they were even mentioned at all. This pattern isn't new. For years, media outlets sympathetic to the far left have blurred the line between illegal immigration and legal immigration, portraying any law enforcement action as persecution. By selectively editing footage and omitting facts, they craft a false sense of injustice designed to evoke outrage and create civil unrest. Take MSNBC's coverage, for example. Their segment titled "A City Under Siege, ICE Targets Canal Street Vendors" never once mentioned that the operation was authorized by federal warrants. It didn't cite the ICE field report or mention that 2 trafficking victims were rescued from illegal labor conditions. The omission was not accidental, this was a strategy. Even social media amplified the distortion. Left-wing influencers, activist accounts, and anonymous profiles circulated clips from the raid, removing context, blurring criminals, and presenting the arrests as random acts of aggression. Many of these posts went viral before ICE even released its own statement. Meanwhile, the data tells another story. ICE's post-operation report listed every arrestee by case number, each with prior charges, deportation orders, or trafficking ties. But that detail rarely makes the news because it doesn't drive clicks or political engagement. Fear and emotion do. The result? Americans end up with headlines, not facts. The irony is, while media outlets accuse ICE of militarization, it's their coverage that fuels real hostility and danger towards federal agents and their families. Online activists use doxing campaigns to expose ICE officers' name and addresses. The same kind of tactics that have put law enforcement lives at risk nationwide. What began as journalism has turned into digital vigilantism. This is the power of narrative warfare. When politicians and media outlets unite to distort facts, law enforcement becomes the villain and criminals become victims. The Canal Street raid exposed how fragile truth has become in the age of outrage. The question isn't just who controls the facts, it's who controls the frame. Chapter 4. The Real Cost. When enforcement is politicized. Every time ICE is vilified for doing its job, the message sent to law enforcement across America is clear. Enforcing the law can destroy your career, your reputation, or even your safety. When immigration enforcement becomes a political weapon, justice becomes optional and accountability disappears. Following the Canal Street raid, ICE officials reported a spike in online threats, doxing campaigns, and harassment directed at their agents. These campaigns often trace back to activist groups and left-wing networks that portray federal officers as villains rather than protectors. It's the same pattern that has emerged after nearly every major ICE operation over the past decade. Outrage first and facts never reported. This is the human cost of political grandstanding. Federal agents with real families, homes, and children are being targeted simply for enforcing immigration law that Congress itself voted on and passed. The same politicians who condemn violence on one hand turn around and fuel a digital mob that attacks anyone who's wearing a badge. Former Governor Cuomo and Mamdani are part of this cycle. By framing ICE enforcement as an attack on immigrants, they embolden activists to treat law enforcement as enemies. But when that narrative turns deadly, when agents receive threats or families are forced into hiding, no one from Albany or Washington takes any responsibility. The price tag isn't just human, it's financial. Every time ICE raids are delayed or obstructed by political pressure, counterfeit networks and labor traffickers gain time to regroup and rebuild. DHS estimates that counterfeit trade alone costs the U.S. economy over $150 billion annually, much of it tied to operations like those uncovered on Canal Street. Democrats argue that ICE enforcement hurts the economy by removing undocumented workers, but the truth is illegal labor undercuts American workers, suppresses wages, and drives up housing demand and consumer costs. Every unregulated worker is one more person paid off the books, one more employer skipping taxes, and one more American losing economic ground. In the end, the cost of politicizing law enforcement is paid not by the politicians or by the media. It's paid by the public and it's paid by the law enforcement officers. Every law unenforced, every officer demonized, and every raid undermined sends a signal that the law itself is negotiable. The Canal Street raid wasn't just about counterfeit goods. It was about exposing a counterfeit narrative. Chapter 5. The Path Forward, Restoring Law and Order. Every major ICE operation, including the Canal Street raid, exposes a deeper national dilemma, one that can't be solved with hashtags or political grandstanding. The question isn't whether we enforce immigration law, but whether we still have the courage to enforce it in the face of political pressure, media distortion, and organized resistance. The first step towards restoring order is simple: enforce the law equally. That means ending sanctuary city loopholes that protect repeat offenders, ensuring that federal agencies can operate without interference from local politicians seeking headlines. The law must apply to everyone, or it protects no one. The second step is transparency. ICE must continue to publish arrest data, warrant records, and conviction histories to combat misinformation. And independent journalists like myself must continue to report the facts and expose the media's false narratives. When facts are visible, propaganda loses all of its power. Transparency not only protects ICE, but it protects public trust. Third, policymakers must distinguish compassion from chaos. Compassion means protecting the vulnerable and maintaining lawful paths to citizenship. Chaos is what happens when politicians exploit emotion to justify lawlessness. The two are not the same. Democrats often claim that strict enforcement dehumanizes immigrants, but what truly dehumanizes people is allowing them to be exploited by black market employers, criminal smugglers, and political opportunists. Real compassion is law that protects both the immigrant and the citizen from exploitation. Anything less is a lie disguised as virtue. To secure America's future, enforcement must be paired with reform. Expand E-Verify nationwide, streamline visa tracking systems, and close the loopholes that enable repeated illegal entry. These are not partisan goals, they are common sense steps to uphold sovereignty and restore balance. The Canal Street raid was not an act of oppression, it was a moment of clarity. A reminder that laws mean nothing without the will to uphold them. America cannot survive on emotion and slogans. It survives when its citizens demand accountability from criminals, from politicians, and from those who twist the truth for power. The Canal Street raid was more than a law enforcement operation. It was a snapshot of the crossroads America stands at today. On one side, the rule of law, the idea that our nation can't survive without accountability, borders, and truth. On the other, a growing movement of politicians and media figures who have built careers on blurring those very lines. What happened on October 21st was not oppression, this was justice. Crime Chef, out.